Naval warfare played an important role in World War I. U-boats were very important in World War I because they could go underwater and fight the enemy. Seaplanes also played a major role because there were big air bubbles under the plane. Therefore, it could land on water next to the aircraft carrier and be lifted onto the aircraft carrier, which was very useful and helpful. They still use aircraft carriers today, also with seaplanes, because they are very helpful.
U-boats were a huge factor in naval warfare. They were first used by the Germans. Unlike today's submarines, the U-boats mostly stayed on the surface of the water and only went underwater during periods of battle. The U-boats used torpedoes and mines as weapons. The only problem was the U-boats were defenseless on the surface. Most of them were diesel, battery, or kerosene powered. Today's subs are nuclear powered and have cruise and ballistic missiles on them today to attack land and water targets. They also now have sonar and are able to take oxygen out of the water to be able to stay underwater for weeks.
The float plane was the development of the land-based aircraft. Floats were mounted under the bottom of the plane instead of the wheeled landing gear, so it could land on water. Float planes were more popular than the flying boats for small aircraft designs because it permits a single engine to be installed at the front of the plane. It could be done on flying boats only by mounting the engine really high above the fuselage. The fuselages of the float planes are much more aerodynamic than the flying boats with wheels for landing gear. Between 1910 and 1914, the navies of all the major powers became more interested in using the aircraft for Renaissance purposes. At the end of their flight, they would land next to the ship and be raised back on deck because they had to land in the water because of their water landing gear. The first seaplane was called the HMS Hermes and was hit by a torpedo and was sunk in November of 1914.
In World War I, there were many different types of naval battleships used to fight overseas, including cruisers, dreadnoughts, and torpedo boats. The main purpose of a battleship was to be heavily armored and protect men and carry heavy artillery. One of the types of boats used were the cruisers. These boats were usually smaller than a regular-sized battleship and were used for police work, raiding, and supporting ships in a fleet action. Another type of boat was called a dreadnought. These ships were mainly used to fight other large warships and were their main defense against torpedoes. The last type of boat was a torpedo boat. They were highly useful ships because they were light, very fast, and armed with torpedoes. These ships were important to warfare because they could slow down a ship even with an indirect hit.
In conclusion, navies played a huge role in World War I. Without the new technology they had, like the U-boats, seaplanes, and aircraft carriers, the outcomes of the war wouldn't be the same, maybe in a good or bad way. Without a navy, we wouldn't have the power we have today.